and welcome back to the Cannabis Infused Motherhood YouTube channel. This channel is all about cannabis, spirituality, and healing, and I like to share all sorts of different things regarding cannabis, how it affects us, the magic behind it, and a whole bunch of different things. And I also like to do tutorial videos on how to make your own butters, your own tinctures, oils, things like that. So if you like that kind of stuff, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, and I will be happy to have you as part of this community. So today we are going to talk about cannabis and the risk of it increasing mental illness. Canada legalized cannabis, and that's where I live. I'm in Ontario. And there's still a lot of stigma and myths and just kind of misinformation going around about cannabis, and I'm here just to kind of help you have an open mind and learn a little bit about it so that you can go into it confidently without fear and be just confident and secure in your decision to use cannabis, whether recreationally, spiritually, or medicinally, which I think no matter where you get it, that all three are kind of incorporated at the same time because cannabis is such a versatile and amazing herb. There is kind of a shadow aspect to cannabis, and what I mean by that is just kind of like, the darker side of things. So there are some risks involved when choosing to consume it. But there are also many, many, many benefits, and for most people, the benefits definitely outweigh the any risks involved. So, but like I said, being aware and conscious and just knowing how cannabis affects our bodies is going to be a huge tool to help you make informed decisions and just be confident in what you are doing. So let's talk about cannabis and mental illness, okay? So I did a little bit of digging, and according to Canada.ca, cannabis use increases the risk of developing mental illnesses such as psychosis and schizophrenia, especially in those who start using cannabis at a young age, and in those who use cannabis daily or almost every day, so very frequently. It's also risky for those who have a history of psychosis or schizophrenia in their family, so it's good to proceed with caution. So on Canada.ca, they also state that frequent cannabis use has been associated to increase risks of suicide, depression, and anxiety disorders. So as I said, I've done a little bit of digging, and there was a study done titled Cannabis and Psychosis / Schizophrenia Human Studies. So in that study, which I will link below if you want to check it out for yourself, they state that individuals with an established psychotic disorder, cannabis can exacerbate symptoms, trigger relapse, or have negative consequences on the course of the illness. In that study, they also state that it's likely that cannabis exposure is a component cause that interacts with other factors to cause schizophrenia or a psychotic disorder, but is neither necessary or sufficient to do so alone. So according to this study, it could be possible that genetic factors and the use of cannabinoids can amplify the risks for these disorders, but how cannabis actually, like the science behind how the cannabinoids increase the risk factors, are unknown, and we definitely need further research on that. As a side note, I'd like to mention that when I was in the process of acquiring my legal medical cannabis license, which is known as the ACMPR in Canada, they did have a questionnaire, and they did ask if I had psychosis and or schizophrenia, or was there any of that in my family's medical history as well. Fortunately, I do not, but if you are someone that does, who is kind of predisposed to those kind of mental illnesses, it might be better for you to proceed with caution and maybe not choose to use cannabis, or at least speak to a professional before you decide to dive into it. So when it comes to Health Canada's claims that cannabis can increase depression, suicide, and anxiety disorders, I have mixed feelings about that one. So according to this book here, I'm going to show you because it's my favorite book. So this book here, Cannabis and Spirituality, an explorer's guide to an ancient plant spirit ally. So It's edited by Stephen Gray, and there is many, many, many different authors in this book. As you can see, I have a bunch of notes in there, highlighted a bunch of things. Great book, highly recommend if you like learning about this stuff. So according to Stephen Gray, cannabis is an amplifier. So if you go into your smoke session with feelings of depression, or you're feeling anxious, or you're already having suicidal thoughts, cannabis is an amplifier. So if you go into it with that state of mind, it could amplify that. I do agree with that. So it could cause you to be consumed by your depressive thoughts. It could heighten your anxiety and may even increase suicidal thoughts if that is on your mind already when going into using cannabis. So to help with that, the trick is to have a clear head and set the intention that you want your cannabis to have when you sit down to smoke it or eat it or however you're consuming. So if you want it to relax you or ease your anxiety or to help put you in a higher vibrational state, it can also amplify those intentions. So being hyper aware of how you are feeling in any given moment, especially when you're sitting down to partake in cannabis, your awareness of those and what you want the plant to do at that moment in time is super duper important to the impact of the high and what cannabis will do to your health and mental state, because I believe cannabis is very, very, very versatile and kind of like a clear quartz crystal. I heard this analogy, I'm not sure where I picked that up, but it's like a clear quartz crystal if you're into all that stuff. Clear quartz can be programmed with your intentions, much like cannabis can as well. So that is one way to try and avoid amplifying any depressive or anxious states. So, like I said, I recommend that book for anyone who wants to learn more about cannabis and spirituality. It's very, very, very informative. It talks about all sorts of different religions, some history about cannabis, and how it was used in spiritual practice throughout the world and throughout history. Very, very good. So, let's move on and talk about cannabis and depression specifically. So there are tons and tons and tons of studies out there that show the benefits of different cannabinoids and their antidepressant-like qualities. So there's different studies. There's one study in particular that states THC, CBC, and CBD exert antidepressant-like qualities, while CBG and CBN did not. So I'll link that as well below if you want to check out that little study as well. Another study that I found was done that used data from an app called StrainPoint. So that app is something that lets medical cannabis users rate their physical or mental symptoms before and after using cannabis. So I thought that was really useful information because it's firsthand cannabis users, how they're feeling before and after they consume. So before using, they enter the name of the strain and the rate and severity of their symptoms, so like depression, stress, anxiety. And then after 20 minutes, they enter how many puffs they took and rate their symptoms again. That study found that cannabis significantly reduced ratings of depression, anxiety, and stress. So women reported larger reductions in their anxiety after using cannabis than men did. So that's kind of interesting too, because just the difference between men and women. It was also found that strains lower in THC and higher in CBD content was best for reducing perceived symptoms of depression, and the strains with higher THC and high CBD was best for reducing perceived symptoms of stress. So I'll link that study below as well if you wanted to check that out. So moving on to cannabis and suicide. So the first study I took a look at looked at the association between cannabis use and suicidal behavior in patients with psychiatric disorders, where they compared both men and women. So that study concluded that there is no association between cannabis use and suicide in men or women with psychiatric disorders, although heavy cannabis users might have an effect in men. So, and the study states, while previous research has demonstrated a positive association between cannabis use and suicide attempts in the general population, our study reveals that such association does not exist among both men and women with psychiatric disorders. However, the heaviness of cannabis use in men had a modest but significant association with suicide attempt in a subset of the study. So they also took a look at risk factors for suicide attempts in those psychiatric patients. So the sex of the patient, if they were employed or unemployed, and also if they had already been diagnosed with a mood disorder. So I'll link that study below as well. Moving on to another study that I found done by the British Journal of Psychiatry, and they concluded although there was a strong association between cannabis use and suicide, this was explained by markers of psychological and behavioral problems. These results suggest that cannabis use is unlikely to have a strong effect on risk of completed suicide, either directly or as a consequence of mental health problems secondary to its use. So I'll link that study below as well if you wanted to check it out and inform yourself. Don't take my word for anything. I'm just here sharing what I have found. So as far as I'm concerned, cannabis does not contribute to suicide. I believe that there has to be many risk factors and underlying issues for someone to get to that point in their lives to choose to end it. In this case, I don't believe cannabis alone will cause suicide, and just because some people do commit suicide as well as smoke cannabis, I don't believe that correlation equals causation. I don't believe cannabis is responsible for suicide. Moving on, let's talk about cannabis and anxiety. So I have had many personal experiences where cannabis induced an anxiety attack. I'm prone to anxiety. I suffer from it on a daily basis. And based on my personal experience and knowledge of the plant, certain strains can help with anxiety and others can kind of induce it or amplify it. So I'm sure we all know of the stigma of like paranoid stoners. They're all, freaking out when they're high, like paranoid. And I have definitely experienced that in the past. So if you're new to cannabis and are not already aware of this, there are many different cannabinoids, terpenes, and strains of cannabis that you can use. And some may help relieve your anxiety, while some might amplify it and make it worse. So just like some cannabis strains will help you stay alert and energized, while others will make you have that couch lock effect and go to sleep. So dosage and picking the right strain and like terpene profile for you will also be very, very important. So knowing what you need to get the relief and the results you're looking for can become overwhelming, and you'll have to experiment until you find the right strain for you. In my experience, a strain with higher CBD content or taking a cannabis oil with a higher CBD content would be a great place to start. So getting my ACMPR license and knowing what it is in my cannabis has made a world of a difference, because before legalization and before getting my medical cannabis license, I was buying just from friends and people I know in my town, and you didn't always know what strain you were getting or any of the terpenes or anything like that. So that's had a huge impact on how choosing different strains has helped me relieve anxiety rather than amplify it. So just being knowledgeable is very, very important. CBD is also very good for those with anxiety, and it's been studied in people with different anxiety disorders and has been said to have anti-anxiety effects for those with social anxiety disorder, PTSD, and other anxiety disorders. So I'll link a couple links below that you could take a look at, different studies, so that you can make up your own mind. This is kind of like I did this article for Mother's Mary, and I'm just decided to record a video about it. So I'm just basically reading my notes that I had sent into them. Mother's Mary is a fantastic community. They have a website, Facebook page. Just look up Mother's Mary and you will find them. The owners and creators are very, very, very knowledgeable in cannabis. I love them to death. Got off topic a little bit. So in conclusion, there is some truth to some of these misconceptions about cannabis, and I think it has more to do with any underlying issues that are already present within a person rather than cannabis itself. So like I said, cannabis can amplify emotions and feelings when you consume it. So I think that's what leads most often to issues when it comes to cannabis and your mental health. So find out, experiment a little bit, know what your ideal dose is, know what strains work best for you to fit your specific needs. And when you sit down with your cannabis, be sure to take a few deep breaths, set the intention that you want to feel better, set the intention that you want to elevate your mood, set your intention that you want to decrease your anxiety and you want to relax and breathe deeper. And just by using it consciously, that could greatly affect the benefits of your cannabis. So do your research. Like I said, experiment to find what works. Be informed, be confident in what you're doing, and don't forget to set intentions to get the most out of your cannabis use. So I hope you liked this video. Like I said, this channel is all about cannabis, spirituality, and healing. If you're into all that stuff, hit the subscribe button. I'd love to see you in this community. Go ahead and comment what you think about cannabis and mental health. Do you think it's beneficial to mental health, or do you think it's detrimental? I'd love to hear what like average people out there are believing about this plant. So yeah, I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.